The recent announcement that Niantic is on the verge of selling Pokémon Go... Oh, you hadn't heard that? Yeah, that might really be happening. Sorry if I just broke that news to you. Anyway, the recent announcement that Niantic is on the verge of selling Pokémon Go got me thinking about the future of the game. Or, more accurately, the future of the actual Pokémon in the game. You know, those creatures that you and I have spent years hunting. What does the future mean for them? Not that I'm sounding any immediate doom and gloom, suggesting that we could all wake up tomorrow only to find that all the time, energy, and in some cases real money vanishing into thin air. I just mean realistically, what will happen to all these Pokemon one day? I wanted to set out today to answer that question. What could happen to your Pokémon Go Pokemon? The best I can work out, this question boils down to roughly 4 potential scenarios. And these scenarios are predicated on the answers to 2 key questions. 1. How long does the player continue playing? And 2. How long will Pokémon Go exist? The answers to these 2 questions will invariably dictate the answer to the main question, what will one day happen to my Pokémon? Starting us off, we have the most straightforward scenario. You stop playing the game. Statistically, this has been the most likely conclusion to Pokémon Go, since the game launched in 2016 with an estimated 232 million players globally. Today, that number is less than half, with roughly 90 million current players, meaning that the majority of players in the game's history have simply left, abandoning whatever Pokémon they caught in that time. But that's what's already happened. What if you or I decide to put down Pokémon Go and never return? Well, the Pokémon will stay stored in the game's servers for as long as the game continues to function. Whether or not Pokémon Go continues to exist is immaterial to this scenario, since we've already abandoned them. Like Schrodinger's Meowth, their existence neither is nor isn't, and can best be considered as an unknown quantity in the universe. But let's put aside abandoning Pokémon and consider a slightly more optimistic outcome. In this scenario, Pokémon Go continues to exist for the foreseeable future, and so do you. The months, years, even decades march on, and you remain a loyal player. You enter your twilight years eagerly awaiting the release of Gen 19 Pokémon, and hope that your artificial hips will get you through another community day. Your children played with you for a while, but soon grew tired of their parents' interests, as children often do. They grew up and built families of their own, but their children, your grandchildren, took up the game spending time with you, and still love going to the park to play that old-fashioned mobile game catching funny creatures that you've been playing for more than 40 years. But, as is always the case, time catches up to you. The game that used to get you outdoors, keep you active, and soaking up vitamin D begins to become too much for you. The game drifts into the background as your time grows short, but you're still able to do one thing by passing the game onto the next generation of trainers. So you see to it that the creatures you cultivated over many years are transferred to your grandchildren, and the Pokemon you cherished become a token of love that your grandchildren can keep as a reminder of you for many years. This scenario, as much as you may not want it to be, is easily the least likely, since it is dependent both on a mobile game continuing well past its life expectancy by several magnitudes, but also of a player never tiring of it. But to be fair, Pokemon as a property and Pokemon Go as a game have already defied just about every expectation anyone has ever put on it. So now let's look at some of the more realistic scenarios. It is the day of Armageddon in Pokémon Go. The game's servers will soon be shut off, like a planet-destroying comet hurtling suddenly towards the world of Pokémon Go and all who inhabit it, to plunge it into darkness and nothingness. And in an instant, all is lost. Every Pokémon ever introduced into the game, caught and kept by players over the years, are instantly vaporized from memory, never to exist again and with no record they ever had. No past, no present, no future. They are lost to time forever. This is the nightmare scenario for loyal players of the game. No warnings, no chance to retain any of what was spent, just instantaneous nothingness. This, I hope, is as unlikely as we all wish it to be. And here we all are. We have finally arrived at what I feel is the most likely conclusion for this game, that we all have poured a significant chunk of ourselves into. Just as before, in the world of Pokemon Go, Armageddon is fast approaching. The developers, whoever they are at this time, have announced that the game will soon be shutting down. But unlike in our previous scenario, there is still time. Still time to rescue your Pokemon and ferry them someplace safe. A place where they can continue their existence. It is a chance for you to become a hero. To craft a life raft and give your Pokemon another chance. This is the Great Pokemon Go Exodus. The scenario that, if you want it to be, will enable you to preserve what you've captured in Pokemon Go. By transferring from Pokemon Go to Pokemon Home, your Pokemon can live on, without fear of Niantic or some other company erasing them from existence. But, as is often the case, this rescue mission comes with a cost, both literal and figurative, and I thought it best you know about them now. To start, storing your Pokemon in Pokemon Home isn't free. You'll have to set up an account and pay a storage fee. And figuratively, the Great Pokemon Go Exodus will not be without its casualties, because some Pokemon will need to be left behind. Different Pokemon Go players play the game differently. Some are hardcore, some are casual, some spend a lot of money, some play for free. But despite this, if you were to ask any player what Pokemon they have caught the most of, their answers would probably be identical. Pikachu, the mascot for the series itself, the most well-known Pokemon that is featured in every single major event, regardless of what it is. It's also the Pokemon that's been given more than 70 different costumes to date, including 4 this weekend. But despite it being the most caught Pokemon, with all its countless costumes, hats, without some form of intervention, they will all need to be left behind in a dying world. And this goes for all costume Pokemon. Got a shiny flower crown Umbreon, armored Mewtwo, Snorlax wearing a leather jacket? They aren't welcome in heaven. They will be cast out for daring to have flair. And they won't be alone. Currently joining them as they descend into oblivion are any form of Zygarde, as well as the origin forms of Dialga and Palkia, which will meet their demise because Niantic treated them as completely separate entries from regular Dialga and Palkia, instead of forms that you could change. Now, you may be wondering, wait, there are many Pokemon that have different forms, like Giratina and Castform, that Niantic also treated as completely separate entries. Are they all going to perish as well? And the answer to that is yes and no. For these Pokemon, they can board your proverbial rescue ship and be transferred to Pokemon Home, but when they arrive, they will all revert to a default of what they were. For example, your Giratina origins will all become altered form. Your Sunshine Cherums will all become overcast, and your cast forms will revert back to the normal form. If you're like me and caught a bunch of shiny normal cast forms when they were released, that's good news since I technically have all of them. But bad news for anyone that shiny hunted each weather form. Tough break for the shiny icy cast form enjoyers. Also a tough break for anyone who hunted or shiny hunted all the Genesect with drives, because they will all become regular old Genesects. But there's one species of Pokemon that will have it worse than any other. One species that simply can't come along. Can't, under any circumstances, board the proverbial rescue ship. Pikachu could at least take solace in the fact that, even if it perishes, its species will live on. But one species will not be granted such solace. One species is cursed to remain on a dying world, knowing none of its brethren will live on. I'm sorry, buddy. Spinda isn't welcome in the new Pokemon world. It can't be saved, can't be rescued, because it's simply too unique. Because the patterns on Spinda are randomly generated with more than 4 billion possibilities. But the code written to generate this in the original games executes the code backwards, meaning that it has, to this day, created technical issues for transferring them to Pokemon Home. Pokemon Go's version of Spinda only has 20 patterns, but since transferring it to Home would require the ability to render a new one, Spinda has to be left behind. And that's it. Those are the possible outcomes and conclusions for your Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Well, except for Spinda, that dude is dead. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there, trainers.